Well, I'm glad that we could get together today. It is, for all the folks out there, December 2nd. We already said that we were done with season 2 and we just can't quit recording. So we're
Oh
doing
no.
a bonus episode today, a very brief one, just to kind of recap our experience with NaNoWriMo and what we got out of it. So Tim, welcome, sir.
Oh, hello. It's nice to see you. How fancy to find you here on the interwebs.
Exactly.
Yeah. I always thought when I would finish, when I thought I finished my novel, the one that I wrote over the summer, I was going to feel like, John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever, just, walking down the street, staying alive, just kind of like feeling it. But I really got to be honest. It was more like Daniel Day-Lewis at the end of There Will Be Blood, where I'm just like, I'm finished, and just like, oh my gosh, ready to collapse.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
well, you finished. Not only did
but
you
I
finish
finished.
once, you finished twice, right?
Yeah, and so the thing about it was the muscle was there, and I think I might have even mentioned this in a previous episode where I had been able to sit down and write about 1,000 words per 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how much time or attention I was also spending to whatever Spotify playlist I was making at the time. So once I finished at the very beginning of November, I challenged myself. I was like, I'm kind of in this, and I knew the NaNoWriMo is the thing. Let's see if I can challenge myself to not just sit down and bang out 1,000 words of a novel when I could, but to really push myself and to try and bang out 1,700 words every day. And yeah, by the end of November, I got to the point where I wanted to challenge myself. I just had a couple thousand words left. Could I finish it before November 30th? And so, a couple of extra sessions on the subway home, just slipping off from, instead of eating on my breaks at work, I just sort of sat down with it and was able to finish it on November 29th. And so I just have a couple thoughts about it, but I mean, it's crazy to have it finished.
Congrats. I
Um,
mean, that's fantastic, first of all. Regardless of what shape it's in, right? And we know that
right.
we all need to kind of dive back into our first drafts and make them second and third and fourth drafts. But man, congratulations. I mean, you just crushed it.
Yeah. And I just want to make sure, because if because I know how I was when I was 25 or I was 30, 35, 40, 45. I just know that if I hear someone, social media always puts the best foot forward. And one of the things that I've always been very, very careful is to try and not be like, well, in my novel, I don't like saying that I have a novel. Knowing myself from earlier when I was just afraid of writing in itself, to hear someone say that they had finished 2 novels, that would be super intimidating to me and be one of those things that I'd just be like, I can't do it. How did this person write 2 novels in 1 year? That's ridiculous. I can't even write 100 words and make myself feel good about it. So I just want to make sure, just if you're out there and you're sort of like trying to find the time and haven't done it yet and haven't felt that, been able to kind of push yourself, please know that I was there. And the reason that I know that it can be done and that I don't want to say that I have novels is because I've actually, since 2015, I've done this 6 times now. I have 6 50,000 word pieces that I've written, but none of them, I've gone back to none of them. Maybe that first one that I did, the record store novel that I wrote with you,
Yeah, I
Art.
remember that.
Because, the one thing is like, can I challenge myself to write something so long? Can I focus on that? And then it's another challenge of just rereading it, because you're going to reread it and go, oh my gosh. And then the amount of things that you're going to have to fix, I am not looking forward to that. That's kind of all I really wanted to say about it.
Now that makes a lot of sense. When we were talking about doing a bonus episode, I'm like, oh man, it's kind of wanted the break, but then I'm like, oh wait, I want to say this, I want to say this. So how many did I come up with, Tim? I got a top 5, man. Come on. I got a top
Hey!
5 things I learned
Yeah!
from NaNoWriMo. You damn right I do.
Perfect. gimme.
These are for me, right? It's not like I'm trying to teach other people, but I think this is a fun opportunity for me to reflect back on the experience and see what I take away so that I can carry it forward into the work, because that's ultimately the goal. So number one for me, November sucks for this kind of work. I cannot do November. And that's why it's not a failure in me as an individual or as a writer that I don't have the stamina or the strength of the patience or anything like that. November is way too busy for me. The work that I do, and I mentioned this in our last episode, the kind of work that I do and the kind of demands on my time in this time of the year, most people are winding down. I'm ramping up. So like, I'm never going to do this in November again, period. Just not going to do it. Now, with that said, it might be an interesting thing to do in the middle of the year, say the May, June, July timeframe, when I can find time away from special projects and devote 30 consecutive days. You can, on the NaNoWriMo site, I'm pretty darn sure you can set up your own parameters for a thing and like set your word count and set your target and the time frame. So like you can customize this. There's no reason I can't try the sprint again at some point. Just not in November. I'm not doing this in November ever again. I do think there's value though in trying to sprint to, that target word count in a small frame of time, because what I find is that if I work on something, leave it alone, and then come back to it, when I come back to it, I'm different. I'm seeing it differently. It becomes something different because I'm not in the same headspace as I was when I first started. And I think from draft to draft, that's a plus. That's a benefit. But within the same draft, that might actually be a problem, because I might be writing the draft towards something, take a giant pause, come back however long later, look at it with fresh eyes and go, oh, I shouldn't have been writing it that way. I should be going in this other direction. And I think you're going to get more value out of doing that as a complete movement first and then saying, we need to turn this battleship to the left. This is terrible. Yeah. So like that's what number two is. The doing is better than thinking. For like 2 decades plus, I would think stuff to death. And that's where it would go to die. And like just doing it has been so liberating and so freeing, and exhilarating in a way that I'm sure, hundreds of thousands of people out there have already learned this, but I have to continually relearn this thing over and over again. So number 3 is, for me, small deadlines are better than big ones. What I see as a 50,000 word target over the course of a month feels like the Matterhorn, and I'm not going to be able to climb it. But if I can look at it as the 1,600 and change words per day, that's a little better. What I found is that I'm unlikely to do a sprint like this again. Like if I were to do one in June, for example, I don't think I would set 50,000 words in 30 days. I don't like the quality of the work, and I don't like the mindset that I get into when I have that kind of target looming. I'm more concerned about, I've got to get my words done. And it's not about, I've got to tell this part of the story. And I would much prefer to just do 1,000 words a day and call it. Right. So if I'm going to try to hit 50,000 words, I'm going to give myself 50 days to do that instead of 30. I think it's just arbitrary, and I don't like arbitrary deadlines. So small deadlines are better than big ones. So I'm going to right size that to be really no more than 1,000 words a day if I try to do the sprint again. And that's okay, because ultimately nobody cares, right? Right, Tim?
Yep.
Nobody cares.
Yep. Nobody cares.
Number 4 for me is writing is an act of discovery, and the best way to discover is, drum roll please, to write.
Right.
That's just an extenuation of the doing is better than the thinking. Just like sit down and start writing. I was so happy to have things come up in the course of because I really only did NaNoWriMo for about 12 days. And I think 11 consecutive days, and then I hit one more day towards the end of the month. Like, that's it. Because I really didn't have the time. But in those 12 days of writing, I was amazed, like absolutely gobsmacked, that when I sat down and didn't have anything to do, didn't have a clear vision of what I wanted to accomplish in that writing session and just started writing, I would gravitate towards things that were compelling. And I was writing for discovery to find out, okay, well, here's the situation, kind of what would they do here? And it would inevitably take me into a place that I hadn't expected, that I found delightful and very engaging, to the point where I wrote, I think it was either 4 or 5 commercials that occur within their advertisements for the company
Yeah.
that's terraforming the planet. And I'm like, why am I writing commercials for the company? And then it dawned on me a little later. Oh, no. This is why you're doing that, because it'll make this, and this work. And it's a really clever way to kind of get out these core principles and also the way that the company tries to package itself versus what it actually is. Like,
Yeah.
that's really cool without me as the
Yeah.
narrator going, the company was X and tried to do Y.
Exactly.
It's like, no, just
yeah.
watch the commercial. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were the commercials in the piece that I sent you?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
I read the commercials.
Cool.
Very nice.
Cool.
Especially how you sort of like, you have this sort of treatment of it, like a slow camera pan of, it's like,
yeah. It is. It's like, the direction, like the director's directions on what would happen. The last thing I wanted to point out, number 5, I can absolutely do this. I am thrilled at the end of this experience, even though I didn't hit the target. Like, I don't care. I really don't, because work is crazy. But I can absolutely do this. If I budget 1,000 words a day and I give myself enough days, I can do it. So it's not a sprint. And I think that's where NaNoWriMo is a bit of a disconnect for me, but probably not for other folks. But for me, they treat the marathon like it's a sprint. And I can't do that. I can't. I'm not a world-class runner. I can't do that. So anyway, that's what I learned.
Yeah, I just feel like the NaNoWriMo for me was, when you were talking a little bit earlier about like, finding, inspiration within the writing, the thing about NaNoWriMo for me was like somewhere in the middle, somewhere around November 15th, I was writing, I got a great idea. I started on that idea. And then I got a succession of bad ideas. And those bad ideas came because I couldn't get to it at work. I couldn't go on my break. I couldn't take my hour-long break just because of the nature of my job. So I was like, well, I got to do it on the ride home. I got to do it while I'm making dinner. I got to do it while I'm walking the dog. And being very tired from work also led to and I was just like, this is not very good. So at one point, I came to realize what was happening was when I wrote the Madeleine Tin, my Mal Noir book, I could step away from it and then say, let's regroup. Let's figure out what's going on, what's going on. But NaNoWriMo is just like, no, if you're going to hit this goal, if you're doing this, if you're doing the what is it, the 30-day carb challenge or whatever diet fads are, you have to hit this today. And so I really started to stress out about that. I felt bad. I was having, NaNoWriMo asks, how did you feel when you were writing this segment, when you do the update? And my big laughing smiley face became like, like that sort of middle or frown. And then I realized I let go of it. I said, wait a minute, this is a first draft. It doesn't have to make sense. So I just pulled a scene, a couple of days later where I was like, all right, well, here's our goals. Here's our objectives. Here's what's happened, as a sort of way of like propelling the story forward. And when I read it a second time, giving myself the notes. Oh, this is where I need to fix to get to this spot in this piece.
Right.
So yeah, I love the fact that the challenge of NaNoWriMo, if you are someone who is like gung ho about that challenge and ready to get at it, that's great. Go for it. Do it. Try it. Do what you can. Don't be scared of it. And but if you're somebody who was like me, I really tried to do the NaNoWriMo with that first novel. We sort of briefly touched on it, the record store novel, I call it. The first thing I wrote way back in 2015, and I missed the NaNoWriMo deadline by I started in the beginning of November and I ended it in January. And so I think it's just, it's, you're going to have a different idea about it. You're going to have a different idea about it. You over there in Colorado listening are going to have a different idea about it. And you who's in Stockholm, Sweden, you're going to have different ways of approaching NaNoWriMo. They're all completely valid. If it works for you, awesome. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. Don't sweat it.
No, I agree. Yeah, and you can give a shout out to our folks in Great Britain. We actually have quite a few listeners in Great Britain. It's fun to see the numbers. Yeah, but anyway, anywhere English is sold.
Yes.
The thing that I'm most excited about is just it's kind of the reinforcement that I can do this, because writing a novel and certainly rewriting a novel and then getting one published and all that, it's so many gate checks of, difficulty. And, to have the staying power to do this. I think it was Dave Baker was talking to us about this in his interview, that you really have to love the process. And it's not
Yeah.
about, the end result. You want it to be as good as you can be, but it's because you love the process. That's why you do it. And I think this NaNoWriMo has given me, really restored to me that love of the process, because before I
Yes.
was dreading it. And it was a source of anxiety for me. But now it's more like, well, you have to get over that initial fear of sitting down and doing it. And you have to get over that
Yep.
initial inertia of, well, I'd rather just watch TV, or I'd rather take a nap, or I'd rather go for a walk. I'd rather do anything other than sit down and write. But I find that if I carve out the time and really put it on my calendar, because I very much am a calendar-driven individual. If it doesn't make my calendar, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I put the 90 minutes on there, oh, and that's the other thing, I did discover 90 minutes equals 1,000 words, give or
That's
take.
great.
So, I
Great.
mean, remember we had that sort of torturous math project before.
Yeah.
If I had just started doing it and just brute force an answer of just like do it a bunch and then like divide and see what happens. That's what I ended
Yeah.
up doing with NaNoWriMo. I took the first 11 days or so and I'm like, oh, hey, how about that? 90 minutes
Yeah.
equals about 1,000 words. And they're
Yeah.
decent words. Like they're not garbage. They're
Yeah.
not perfect, but they're not garbage.
And,
Yeah.
it's a great start. And I just feel like I'm very interested in myself, since I love writing such smaller pieces like microfiction and flash fiction. Since that's something that I absolutely adore, I'm kind of wondering, first off, now that NaNoWriMo is done, I'm just so like, oh wow, I can just get on the subway and go home. I can read someone else's novel. I can do all this other
Yeah.
reading. And I'm really interested to see if I recognize how it affects my writing smaller pieces. And I think that's something that I'm looking forward to. And the one thing that I did do with Madeline Tin that I think is very, very important, that I haven't done before, is I'm going to look to my right. I'm going to look to my left. I'm going to make sure nobody from work is listening to me. I kind of printed the novel out, and I went to the big. We have this old cabinet that has about 60,000 old 3-ring binders, and I grabbed a 3-ring binder. I did the hole punch. I have the novel, one sheet per page, so I can write notes. And the 3-ring binder, it's 214 pages. The 3-ring binder is so big and red, I can't really put it anywhere. So I'm really thinking it's going to force me in the next, hopefully 2-3 weeks. I think I'm thinking maybe January, of just being like, all right, time to crack this open and get at it. So yeah.
Well, that's similar to what, who was it? It was Jeff Oakes, in his interview. He was talking about how he had to physically mail the manuscript to his editor, and they would mail it back and forth. And he basically was
Oh
working off
yeah.
of paper, if you remember that. So that's really,
Yeah.
man, that's an old school approach. I like it. Give it a shot. Let us know how it
Yeah.
goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's on the calendar for the rest of the year and into next year? Just for the folks out in the world, we're planning to come back for season 3 in the probably late January, early February timeframe. We're still looking at it, but certainly not in December or the bulk of January. So how are you choosing to spend that time, Tim?
Like I said, when I finished writing the NaNoWriMo, and now I can go back into the shorter pieces that I like. We always talk about, writing a piece, putting it on the shelf, coming back to it with fresh eyes later. I've got a lot of short pieces that I'm very excited to look at with fresh eyes and be like, why wasn't this working? How wasn't this working? And again, see if punching out this NaNoWriMo helps in looking at shorter pieces. So I'm going to be trying to do that, and just keep submitting to all those literary magazines, pile up those rejections.
Nice. Yeah, I don't feel like I'm at a point where I can start doing a lot of submission yet. I
Yeah.
still don't have a body of work that's worthy of submission, and I still have to complete my first draft of the novel. So,
Yeah.
but I am going to go back to one story in particular. I think we talked about it when we weren't recording one day, but it was a story I'd gotten a lot of good feedback on, but the ending didn't stick. It just wasn't right. It was like too happy. And that's not me.
Yeah.
so, so I think what I'm going to do is chop the ending off and go back to the point where I know the story kind of is authentic. And then that point at which it diverges into the author's trying to do a thing here, I'm going to take everything from that point forward out. And I'm going to write a new ending with the idea that I have in mind. And
Yeah.
I would love to send that to you and get your feedback on it if you're
I'd
up for it.
absolutely love to. And I've probably
Awesome.
got a couple pieces that I'll shoot your way.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I looked at the goals that I had written for myself as a writer for 2023, and I've hit none of them. But
Nice.
on the other hand, while I didn't hit the literary magazines that I still look up to and get a lot of inspiration from, I am very happy that, again, with us talking throughout this season about how to craft a novel, I was able to do one that I really like and another one that, we'll see what happens. It
Yeah.
was just a challenge for myself. So yeah, I'm excited.
It's interesting. So reading between the lines of what you just said, your goals this year, I assume, were publications you wanted to appear in. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
exact. Yes.
I have a recommendation for everybody out there about that. I think I certainly do this, and I'm going to encourage you to think about doing this. I only set goals that I have complete control over accomplishing, because there's no guarantee that the work that is good will arrive on the editor's inbox or desk when they're in a mood to receive it the way it needs to be received, when they have room in their publication, when they have a need that matches what your story provides. Like, none of that is up to you. And so to
Yeah.
make that a goal that you ultimately have no control over, it's a lot like throwing darts at a dartboard with your eyes closed. So
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
goal this year, like, you accomplished two really big things. You did one first draft of two different novels, and you did that in like the last 5-6 months. That's really impressive. So like, when you're looking at 2024, and this is for everybody out there, myself included, set those goals for yourself that are achievable through your own effort and not reliant or dependent on someone else to deem you as worthy or let you into the inner circle or, judge you favorably, because there's no guarantee that that will occur. The only thing we can
Yeah.
control is our own effort. So just set those goals based on your own effort.
Yeah. And it's actually, now that I'm thinking about it, when I did look at those goals and the three big lit mags that I would love to be a part of, when I was in, for lack of a better term, the zone, or if I was visited by the muse, um, in writing these longer pieces, I started to realize maybe these magazines just aren't the writing that I do. And that is the first thing that I've started to notice from writing the longer pieces was maybe I'm just a little bit different than what these people are looking for. They're wonderful magazines. I get inspiration from them on the reg. I think that the kids still say that, but I started to realize maybe I'm just not the writer that these people usually publish, and that's okay. So I think that's great advice, and I'll definitely be looking at that in 2024,
Yeah, yeah.
as well as having a great season 3 with my bestie Art Franz the fourth.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to season 3. It should be fun. Like I said, in a previous episode, we've already got 3 people lined up. I'm actively reaching out to others, and I think we're going to have, more interviews and more different opinions to kind of sift through, because ours aren't the only opinions that matter. Writing is a solitary effort, but everybody has a different approach to it. I love hearing other people's approaches to it to see if there's something that I can, lift and try on my own.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's going to be great. Well, look, have a great time off.
Yeah.
Enjoy your time, and I know we'll be talking during the break, but we'll see everybody else back in late January, early February.
Yeah. Reach out to us. Let us know what's going on. Hit us up. Send us your requests. Send us what you want to talk about. I'm really interested to hear, and especially all of you out there in Great Britain, what you guys want to hear from season 3.